You guys ready for this? All right. I've done a lot of workshops that are where we're focusing on some different aspect of nature journaling, perhaps drawing amphibians, or making frog skin look slimy, or how to draw insects. But in a lot of those classes, there's some major themes that keep popping up again and again and again, these big sort of reoccurring themes. And I realized that there are sort of 5 big ideas that I think are high percentage drawing ideas that if you start to do this more, it really, really helps your sketching and drawing. And so I wanted to sort of emphasize what I think are some of the top 5 drawing tricks that that if you start to incorporate this into your game, it makes the biggest difference. Are you ready? All right, number 1. Now, a bunch of these are things you already know. I'm hoping that for the ones that you already know, at least there's some kind of tweak or new angle on that where you'll see like, oh, I'm not really leveraging that the way that I could. But there'll be some things that you already know. And the first one, which is the most important, I'm sure that everybody here already knows. What is the single most important thing you can do to draw better?
Draw.
Thank you. You pass. It is. She's absolutely right. She says, if you want to draw, draw. Right? Yeah, draw a lot. You want to draw better, draw more. And this isn't what everybody wants to hear, because everybody wants like, yeah, I know that, but give me, what is the shortcut? What is the trick? What is the hack so I can make my drawings work better? It actually is this. It actually is this. We have this myth that drawing is this gift that you either have or you don't have, and if you weren't born the drawer, you're just out of luck. And but really, it is something that people get by just doing it a lot. So people who can play the guitar, it's because, gosh, they play the guitar. Right? Nobody's born playing the violin. They practiced a lot. And what we now know from studying human brains is that if you do it, it will come. Your brains constantly change throughout your life. And they change depending on not what you want to do, but on the basis of what you actually do. So if you show up on a regular basis and are doing something, your brain goes, oh, look, you're really serious about that? Well, then we'd better lay down some neurons to facilitate that activity, because you really mean it. You're doing that a lot. And you change the structure of your brain. You actually change the shape of your brain by what you do. And it happens fast. So this is some of the graphics from a really interesting study that was done looking at what they call neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change. And they took a bunch of people and they taught them how to juggle. And in the first week, there were measurable changes in the shape and structure, the density of the gray matter in people's brains. And so by learning how to juggle, these folks who couldn't juggle before, they learned how to juggle, they got pretty good at it. They changed the shape of their brain. So you're not, we used to think that like somewhere in adolescence your brain stops making new neurons and it's just a downhill slide from there. But throughout your life, your brain is making new neurons. And so you can, there are these sort of online brain gym game things where you can pay people money and you learn how to play their little video game. And this actually makes measurable changes in the gray matter in people's heads. But why not actually learn a new useful skill? So this is with juggling, and it also happens when you're just really concentrating and focusing on things. This is from a study that was done on doctors, or people who are medical students who want to be doctors, and they're studying for their big exam. This was 3 months out from the exam, and the density of their gray matter, and then when the exam arrived, they had been like studying and cramming, and that changed the shape of their brains. This intensive work for this big test, it changed the structure of their brains. And then 3 months out from that, they're actually on spring break here. those changes are persisting in their brains. So they change the shape of the brain. You are responsible for the shape of your brain. And it's not wanting to do something, it's actually doing something. So the trick is that I want everybody to think right now, in the last month, how much drawing did you do? Right? See, that's what's going on here. That's why this is such an important thing. Because if you're not doing it, it doesn't happen. All right? I did my own little kind of informal study here. I went onto our Nature Journal Club Facebook page and I just looked at who are a bunch of people who are regular posters on our Facebook page, who are putting up, here's a drawing I did, here's a drawing I did, here's a drawing I did. And I looked at their work a year ago and I looked at their work now. And you can do this yourself. Just go on our Facebook page, see who's posting a lot, and then go over to their profile and scroll down through their photographs, and you'll see they're drawing. Go a year into the past, and you'll be amazed at what you see. So just a couple of examples of what I found. So this is a guy, Vincent. He joins us over in Oakland, and this was his giraffe 1 year ago. Right? Fast forward a year. What? But this is 1 year. Right? I mean, look at what's happening here. I mean, he's got some pattern and some proportions working here. Here, he's got those patterns and the light and shadow. There's reflected light on this. He's putting in patterns with his eraser. He's got the negative space here. Look at the structure of the head and the eye here. Whoops. Isn't that interesting? So that's 1 year. That's 1 year. So it doesn't stop, right? Lena, say hello. Hello. You're up next. All right. So this was Lena a year ago. So this on her during her lunch break, Lena saw this jay. Right? And Lena is drawing all the time in staff meetings. Right? So she's sitting there and she saw this bird on her lunch break. She drew it. This was Lena then. Right? There's some really solid anatomy and brushwork going on. But compare this to now. Right? That it's the details, everything is much more articulated. The variation that she's putting into the plumage really is reflecting this deeper understanding, not just of how the materials work, but of the structure of birds. That's 1 year. Another big regular poster, you can do this yourself. Like, go check out Lena a year ago. Go check out her now. Right? So Dale posts, he's drawing a lot. He is drawing all the time. Right? And he loves hiking, and he'll go on these big backpacking trips, and he brings his family. And any little chance he gets, he gets caught in a downpour. Like he and his daughters, they're inside their tent, and they're painting, or looking out the door of the tent. And so this is a year ago. This is now. This is the impact of just doing it. Just doing it. And I had some really lovely correspondence with Dale, kind of back and forth about kind of what he was thinking about in his process. And in one of those, he wrote this, and I hope it's okay with him that I share this with everybody. But he had some kind of reflections on what his experiences has been, and I just thought I would put that up for you. Give you a moment. Isn't that beautiful? So he's a poet too then. So he's something that's really interesting here, and we'll be kind of circling back to this idea, is that he's talking about that he's doing this because he wants to see the world more richly. He's not doing it with the goal of making a pretty picture, but to see the world more. That's his goal. And interesting to note that he's drawing all the time. Right? One of our Nature Journal Club members from Mexico, I want to send a shout out to Luis out there, does this wonderful stuff with pen on toned paper. Then he gets a white gel pen and gets it in there, and he gets this sort of wonderful contrast with that. So this is what Luis was doing 1 year ago. All right? Fast forward, this is now. So, but why is this happening? Because these people are drawing a lot, right? It's a numbers game. It really is a numbers game. And the more you do, the more this happens. So the Greeks would say that you have to show the muse that you're serious by your work, by your labor, right? Another way of thinking of that is you need to show your brain, your neurons, that you mean it. You do this on a regular basis, your brain goes like, oh really, this is what we're doing? Okay, game on. With this strange activity, I'm looking at something and it's coming out my hand with a little pencil. Your brain will change its shape to do this. And the more you do, the more it happens. And it never stops. So he's going to be better than this next year. What's this going to be looking like at this time next year? I'm going to go look and find out, but I have to wait. And you do too. All right? But you're going to see the same thing happening in your journals. So thing number one, so the first rule of Sketch Club is draw a lot. The second rule of Sketch Club is draw a lot. Thank you. Right. So that joke went over like a lead balloon in the first workshop that I did. There was nobody in the entire room who had seen Fight Club, and so I dropped the second rule of Journal Club is, and you could just like the cricket was chirping in the corner. So thank you for picking up on that. So if you haven't seen Fight Club, well, sketch. So this is up. Don't worry, the other three actually are different things. Right? But this is up here again because this really is the most important thing. And nobody wants to admit this because we want there to be some secret, some little shortcut. But really, you start doing it, you will change your brain. But we will tend to do, so we're like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm going to do that. But we tend to do today with whatever it was that we did yesterday and the day before that. We're creatures of habit. So if it's your habit to be journaling a lot, then it's easy for this to happen for you. But if that's not your habit, you will tend to, even though you know maybe I should be doing this, you're going to do tomorrow whatever it is that you did today. So if you weren't drawing today, tomorrow you're not going to be drawing either. So what we have to do is we have to change our behavior patterns. We actually have to change our habits. And so, again, reflect on how much you drew this last month. All right? Do you want that to change? If so, let's be intentional about how we're going to do that. So what are some things that you know works to help you make habits, to do the things, to make this more possible? What do you find works for you, either in getting you to sketch more, or what do you find works for you in helping you maintain other habits that you want to keep?
Time of day.
Tell us more about that.
Well, I don't even do this very well, but I try to get into the habit of getting up an hour earlier than I need to get up so that I can dedicate to just sketching and doodling to wake up.
So, I don't know if that came through on the microphone. All right, so I'm going to paraphrase what you said and make sure that I got it right. You're saying that you are getting up an hour earlier every day to give yourself a block of scheduled time to do this on a regular basis. So you're making an appointment with it. You're prioritizing it. You are making this happen. She's getting up a little bit earlier to give you, because there is no free time, right? Just like, I'm going to do this when all the emails are answered and all the laundry is folded. And the next time I have a good block of 5 hours, I'll maybe do some sketching. This is not going to happen, right? But she prioritized it, and she's getting up earlier in the morning to give herself time to do this on a regular basis. Right? So a couple of interesting things there. She's got it scheduled in, and she's prioritized it. What else?
It's really relaxing. It takes the stress away.
All right. So Lena is saying that it's very relaxing and it takes the stress away. So when she's doing this, the more that she's actually conscious of her shoulders dropping, her jaw unclenching, her heartbeat coming down, those sorts of things, if you actually kind of celebrate that effect that it has on you, you are actually helping your brain enjoy that experience. And then you're giving yourself more positive reinforcement for it. So kind of revel in the kind of like, oh, okay, good. And then you'll look forward to it more. So notice the impact that it has on you and sort of celebrate that. I also find it helps to sort of notice, like, because I did this, all of a sudden I'm noticing sunlight on leaves that I otherwise wouldn't have seen. There's this moment of beauty that otherwise would have completely missed me. So whatever you're getting from it, whether or not it's a pretty picture or not, celebrate that, note it, make a big deal out of it in your brain and go, hooray. Like, no, really, brain, look at, wow, right? The reverse side of that is that when our brain starts going like, oh no, that doesn't look like the bunting, right? And that little inner critic comes up and goes, oh, you think you can draw a bunting, right? How many people have that little critic show up in their brains, all right? How many people have ever started drawing and just had that critic totally shut them down, all right? So I'm coming up with strategies for dealing with that critic because I have it, everybody's got it. Right? It's not that you get to some point and that critic goes away. I bet Robert Bateman has this little critic going like, that's not, a autumn evening with an elk bugling. So what I do that really, really helps is that when that voice pops up, first of all, I'm really clear with myself about why I'm doing this. And for me, it's not actually to make pretty pictures. If I get a pretty picture, that's a bonus. That's the sidecar that kind of comes along with it. Oh, great, look, that one was a pretty picture. But I'm doing this because, number one, I want to observe the world more richly. I want to notice things that I otherwise wouldn't have seen. So if I notice that sunlight on the trees and I otherwise wouldn't have seen it, that drawing is successful. Number two is I am journaling to help me remember. This process will lock this stuff into my brain much more vividly. And so if doing this helps me remember, my drawing is successful. And my third reason is that it slows me down enough to the point that I start asking questions about the world that I'm seeing around me. And if I come up with questions that I otherwise would not have asked of the world, if I've gotten to be a more curious Homo sapien, then this drawing is successful. And so when that critic shows up and says like, wait, Jack, that doesn't look like the bunting. Like, what are you doing? Like, got the peak all wrong. I go like, oh, actually, first of all, I label that voice. I go like, oh, hey, judging critic, it's you again. And judging critic goes like, yeah, it's me. So I got to know who that is. That's judging critic. Judging critic comes up and wants to stop you from doing this. And then I just remind judging critic, like, actually, I'm not doing this to make a pretty picture. Sometimes they turn out that way, that's great. Sometimes they don't, that's great. I said, I'm doing this because, you know what, by doing this, I noticed something about the light on the back of the bunting. When it's backlit like that, you can actually see some orange through the top of the head of the feathers. Like, what's going on with that? I've never seen that before. And judging critic goes like, oh yeah, I guess that is pretty cool. Sorry, didn't mean to bother you, carry on. All right? So when that critic pops up, know who it is and label it. Oh, hey, look, there's judging critic. And just remind judging critic why you're doing what you're doing. And it actually helps you just get back into your flow, right? And you have to really believe that you're doing that too for that reason. What are some other things? Yeah.
Keep a sketch pad and writing utensil with you at all times so you can kind of fill up some random waiting time.
Yes. So she's got her gear with her all the time. If you don't have it, you can't do it. If it's a hassle to get your stuff together, you're not going to do it. Like, oh, I've got maybe just a little block of time. I can do some sketching. So what? You're going to root all over the house to find your sketchbook over here and your pencils over there. By the time you get all this stuff together, the moment's gone. Oh, there's another email. Better answer that. Right? And the moment's gone. But if you can like, oh, I'm here in this waiting room, and I'm going to draw the little orchid that they have on the desk. Whatever it is, in those times in between, you can be doing more and more of this. So some people will carry stuff in their handbag, in their purse. Others will have a little system that they carry in their backpack. Other people will have multiple ones. One's in the car, one's by their breakfast table. So, if part of your routine is you get up in the morning and you have your cup of coffee, have a little notebook by that table and sit there and do some sketches. So you're going to link this sketching onto something that you're already doing. So you're going to hook it onto that. And then when you're in there having your coffee in the morning, all of a sudden you're having your coffee and you're sketching. That becomes your routine. The more you do it, the easier it is for you to do it more. But if you don't have your gear, you're not going to be able to do it. All right? If you want to sketch in your staff meetings and you didn't bring your sketching stuff, all right, then you can't do it. So, any other thoughts, ways that you can make this your habit? Yes?
For me, it's when I see pictures, like on my Facebook page, I belong to these groups and they post pictures of birds, and when I see them, it inspires me to want to draw.
Great. So, search the world for things that inspire you and then copy those ideas. Some people will look at other people's work and they go like, oh, I can't do that, right? And it shuts you down. But instead, look at that work from the scavenger perspective, like, oh, great idea. I'm going to give that a shot, right? Find those things and use those to help you. There are no original ideas out here, right? Everything, I think probably in this book on how to do nature journaling, came from some other place that I saw somewhere or was taught by someone else. All right? So climbing on everybody else's shoulders is fine. You're taking in these other ideas, you're making them your own, and you're putting it back out there.
Use a photograph,
Yeah.
actually.
And photographs, may I recommend seeingbirds.com and birdpixel.com. Right? Those are places to go to see some really cool bird art, bird photos that Ashok and Vivek have let us use for inspiration in our nature drawing and journaling. It's a great way to see. And you'll actually be seeing a bunch of photographs from those sites on this talk. All right. So let's see if I wrote down a few. See if we got them all. You mentioned getting your kit accessible. Yeah. Making it a priority and putting it on your calendar. Well, this is one which we didn't get. It's the buddy system. The buddy system is, so if you decide, I'm going to exercise on a regular basis, statistically you're going to fail. If you have a workout buddy that you're doing that with, statistically you're going to be totally successful in your exercise routine. What it takes is not your will, your commitment, but having some accountability there and having a partner, having a buddy that you do this with. So if you're doing this with your family, like the Kanzotis are often out there like, we've got our sketchbooks, we're going to go birding, and now we're drawing together, right? You guys are doing this journaling thing together. You've got your posse, right? You can do this with family. You can do this with other friends. So getting somebody else to do this with. So for folks who are watching this on YouTube, if you don't have a nature journal club in your area, start one. Start one. On my website, I've got some resources to help you figure out how to do that. Go to johnmuirlaws.com, and there's some resources there to help you start your own nature journal club, and you can find that through the Nature Journal Club page. But you can start your own. You get this kind of group of people together that are doing things on a regular basis. You've got all these other people that you can steal ideas from, and it really helps you kind of carry on and pick that up. We talked about linking journaling with things that you are already doing. So linking the habit that you want to make to things that are already your habits. So if it's that cup of coffee, now it's journaling a cup of coffee. We talked about celebrating the things that kind of really work for you and how to kind of deal with that inner critic. And lastly, if you find for yourself like, oh my gosh, I didn't draw at all last month. I'm a terrible sketcher. I guess I can't do this. All right? If you didn't draw all last month, just go, oh, I didn't draw last month. Well, now it's a new month. I guess I'll start drawing. Right? Like some people, they'll start a diet and they're doing really, really well and they're kind of keeping with all their commitments, and then they go to a really good pizzeria and they have like 10 pieces of super sausage, deep dish, and then they're thinking, oh no, and then they completely bail on the entire thing. Just go like, oh wow, that was quite a night. Well, now it's a new day. I'm going to just start this thing again. Right? No big deal. Just be gentle with yourself. Be kind. We're all human. We're doing the best we can. And if you're not like journaling every day, don't think like, oh no, I'm a terrible journaler. No, you're human. So, the big thing is, draw a lot. Number 2, draw a lot. Are you ready for number 3? Now we actually get into some kind of nuts and bolts, things that you can do that will help your drawings. Are you ready? Number 1 is when you're doing your drawing, I find it makes a huge difference to, as the drawing progresses, the way you are drawing actually changes. Right? When you're starting out, they are light lines, they are tentative, you're kind of generally blocking in the shape of something. The speed at which you draw changes. So at the start of a drawing, if you look at somebody who's starting a sketch, their hand should be moving like this. They should be looking at the thing a lot more than they're looking down here, right? And their hand is going really fast, and they're kind of blocking things in roughly. And as that drawing continues on, then you see them kind of slowing down, right? So the speed of your drawing is going to change. The precision of what you're doing goes from very general, roughly blocking things in, to precise. To you like, okay, here are, some of the little feathers around the back of the head. That's stuff that kind of comes in towards the end. You start general and you work towards that more precise, detailed part. Similarly, as you get into more like, and this is the line that I want, you can punch it in and make your lines bolder. These lines at the start are very, very lightweight. The lines that you put in first, because they're not in reference to anything else, are probably the ones that are going to have the biggest proportional problems, the ones you're going to want to change the most. So start, I think of it kind of like a Match.com date, right? If you haven't had the pleasure of going on a Match.com date, it's this online dating service, it's how I met my wife, right? And what you do, it's really weird because you are going out on a date with somebody that you don't know to try to figure out if you like them. Normally, like, you go on a date with somebody that you like, but this, it's like you're constantly setting yourself up on another blind date. And so the general rule is, do not say, will you marry me, or I do, on this date, right? There's kind of a getting to know you period. And it's the same way with a drawing. You want to kind of get to know it, and as your drawing starts to sort of form and take shape, out of 30 different lines will emerge, oh, that's the one I really want to follow. So, and lastly, the detail is something that we just want to, with the precision, the boldness, the detail just comes in here at the very end of the drawing. At the start, if you put in some detail, that's going to lock you into that part of the drawing because, ooh, I made this really good eye. And then you're not going to want to move it over 2 millimeters because you made this perfect little eye. Right? So the detail will lock you into things. So that comes at the end. So the tool that I find the most effective for making this happen is, and I want to see how many people in the room already have one of these bad boys, the erasable non-photo blue pencil. Who's got one? All right, not everybody. Interesting. So here's the deal. I happen to have with me some erasable non-photo blue pencils. And you lucky people. All right, now take a look at your erasable non-photo blue pencil. Is it turning into a little stub? Because everybody gets to go home with a new non-photo blue pencil. All right? But these do not come free. There's a price on this. And what it is, if you want, and I'm going to show you why this is the coolest way to start your drawings. All right? If you want this pencil, you need to commit to, in this month, 16 drawings. 16 drawings. No, within the next 31 days. You've got 31 days for 16 drawings. So that's, you can do a drawing every other day, or you can do all of them in an afternoon. These don't have to be 3-hour drawings. It's best if they're not, because the critical part where you're using this is the beginning of the drawing. I want you to begin 16 drawings. These can be 3-minute drawings, right? It doesn't have to be a long period of time. These can be quick sketches. You see a little part of a bird, and you draw a little part of a bird. Oop, there's one. All right? But what I want to do is to get you to just messing with that and the principles which we're going to be looking at here to get some repetitions in because I want to change the shape of your brain. Who wants a pencil? There you go. Okay.
You want 16 drawings and then write down your homework.
You sure?
Yeah.
No, I've got a bunch more.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
You sure? Ah, there we go.
16 drawings. Write down today's date and write down 16 drawings and then the next. What happens if we don't do 16 drawings? You get a box of pencil back.
Can you help me out? I left the rest of my pencils in the back of my car. So in the back of my car, there is a cardboard box on the right-hand side. Locks, this locks. Oh, sorry, this unlocks, that locks. Okay, thank you. All right, and I'll get everybody here, you're gonna get your pencils, all right? So here's what we do. With this pencil, what's great about it is it makes this very, very pale ghost mark. It has to be, by the way, to be this erasable one. This one is the Prismacolor Copy Knot Non-Photo Blue Pencil. That's the official name of this pencil. For friends at home, go on my website, go to the materials and equipment link, and you can find the full technical description of this pencil, because not all non-photo blue pencils are created the same. And what I do is I lightly block in what I call the posture, the proportions, and the angles with this thing. It's a pencil where I'm roughly blocking in the oomph of this, the critter. So if I'm seeing a lizard, this might be the general angle of its body. And its proportions are like how big is its head relative to that body. So I'm not doing a detailed drawing with this thing. I am roughly blocking it in. Ah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oops, and I didn't. Somebody, we'll have to, if we've got any sharpeners in this room, I'm afraid these ones are not sharpened. Yeah. Okay. But do you want it? Are you going to make 16 drawings this month? Yeah? All right, you get one. You get one. All right. So I've got a few of my sketchbooks here. I'm going to pass these around. What you want to do is just take a look through these and see if you can kind of see in the background of some of the sketches places where, like, oh, back there, I'm seeing very pale, this kind of ghosted blue image. So we'll pass some of these around. You can see that, oops. All right. So this is the critical part of the drawing. And because it's on top of this framework that you do this. All right? And everybody wants to get in here and say, yeah, but how do you draw all these little scales? And we skip this step. But if you want to do this, you need to start with all this other sort of stuff. This lesson was brought to me, kind of home to me rather brutally by another drawing of a Western fence lizard that I did. 2001, I was finishing my science illustration program at UC Santa Cruz. And as part of my portfolio piece, I did a drawing of this lizard that you're about to see. But I fell into the trap that all of us do, where you see these cool parts of the critter and you just really want to draw those. So I was skimping on this step because I thought the foot of this thing is so cool, and they have this right in the middle of their heads on the top. They actually have this third eye. They actually have a third eye on the top of their head, and I want to draw that, and I was thinking, like, how am I going to draw all these scales? And what we do is we tend to exaggerate the size of whatever parts of our subject we think are really cool and interesting. And so this part was boring to me, so make that small. This part was really interesting to me. Oh, it's got the parietal eye, so make that really big. I thought the foot was really cool. So this was not done intentionally as a demonstration of how your proportions can go astray. This is a drawing of the same species, and it looked like this. It was just like these huge snowshoe feet, giant head, super short body. Let's go back to this guy for a second. Oh. Ooh. Ah. Oh, yeah. Like this is like some crazy iguana thing, right? But I was just all into like, look at what I'm doing with these scales on the lips. Like I was just so into this that I was missing the oomph of this thing. And that's the trap that you fall into if you're not blocking in the oomph of this thing at the start. So whatever it is that I'm drawing, right, here a salamander, I start with these as the way I frame it in, and then all the details come on top of that. And you're saying, but yeah, how do you draw all those details? So those are in other workshops that we've done, and they are in this book too, so this is also like an infomercial for my new book coming out on how to do nature journaling. Where is the salamander in this? Oh, here we go. There's the frog. There he is. So yeah, here's a detailed step-by-step of how you put in all those details and the highlights and stuff. And if you want to get that for free, it is all online for free on my website as blog posts. All right, although there are a few secrets in here, you still should look. Okay. This was watercolor with gouache highlight, and also these brown spots are gouache. So that was gouache watercolor together. So what people lose is the fact that behind the drawing is that framework. And the non-photo blue pencil, what's great about it is that when you sketch with it on your piece of paper, just start, make a few lines and sort of see that you will barely be able to see what you have. It doesn't really show up on very smooth paper like the paper that's made for drawing with pens. And some people have a hard time seeing it in intense sunlight, but you shouldn't be staring at your bright white paper in intense sunlight anyway because it's bad for your eyes. Just sort of tilt it so that you kind of get more of a shadow on it. And notice that when you sketch with it, you can see those lines in front of you as long as you can barely see the ghost of what's there. Then what's neat is you then apply your graphite on top of that, and people completely ignore that any of those lines are there. Look at how in those sketchbooks that I'm passing around, those lines are not really in your face. They're there, but they're not a distraction at all. That's the magic of that magic non-photo blue pencil. So we start light, we start loose. We start quickly drawing, kind of blocking something in, and we build it up from there. There's one other thing that I often will put into my preliminary drawings, these little quick non-photo blue pencil sketches, and that's something that I call parallel guides. The idea of a parallel guide is that I don't want to have on my critter's face one eye up here and the other eye down here. So if I put a line across the top of the eye, the bottom of the eye, I'm going to be bounding those eyes. If I put a series of parallel lines, I can get I don't want my nose at a different angle than the eyes, right? So if I have a set of parallel lines going across my subject, I can keep those elements parallel to each other. So here, the forehead, the top of the eye, the bottom of the eye, the bottom of the zygomatic arch, and the chin here, I want to keep those things parallel with each other. And then, as the animal is turning its head at a different angle, now those lines are going to be still parallel to each other. They'll just be at a different angle. So they don't have to be at right angles to your page. So see those parallel guides? Look at how those parallel guides inform where I'm putting kind of final lines as the details kind of come into this sketch. See how I'm using those to keep elements aligned with each other?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you erasing those lines then, or they just kind of fade by themselves?
No, so let me actually do a real life demo. Could I borrow your sketchbook?
Yeah.
All right. Is it okay for me to make a little doodle on that?
Do you want to use that page?
Sure. And may I borrow your non-photo blue pencil or somebody's who are sharpened? Ah. All right. So let's say I'm out there and I see oh gosh, there's a scrub jay. I am going to block this thing in lightly, loosely on my paper. Scrub jays often will have that tail that pops down. You notice that there are no details in this. This is just maybe parallel guides where the different parts of the wing are going to be. And I will make a sketch like this one.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Right? So I'm going to give this back to you. May I borrow somebody's pencil? A regular graphite pencil. May I borrow your pencil? All right. And what's neat is that you're thinking, but yeah, now I'm just going to have all of these blue lines there. But notice, like on the head, you can see your guidelines perfectly well. Mm-hmm. But what's neat is that when I come in here and I start a graphite pencil on top of that, is your eyes are going to snap immediately to these graphite pencil lines. And I'm not going to do this whole thing, but notice that the non-photo blue pencil lines around the head are not a distraction.
What about the ones like that you don't draw over, like the parallel lines?
If people notice them at all, they'll think you're doing some cool shading thing.
You don't usually use the eraser.
I don't. There's a eraser on there. It comes with the pencil, but I almost never use it.
Only if you feel like proportions are off and you want to redo it.
Yeah, or often if my proportions are off, I'll just draw another bigger circle, and I can leave that all one. I actually love the effect of when you can kind of see some of the thinking behind it, like some of these, the Da Vinci sketches where you sort of see, like okay, where they're sort of refining those lines. You can kind of see some of that process behind it. I love actually seeing that in a picture. So I usually will leave those lines there just because there's that story of the process that's behind it.
Even if you watercolor on top of it?
Yep. There's a couple of types of watercolor paper where I found that it is a problem, where it acts as a little bit of a resist. But on almost all types of watercolor paper, like on all these sketchbooks here, where I've watercolored over it, there are I don't have my glasses on, so I can't. Yeah, so there's watercolor behind this. I mean, there's blue pencil behind it, and I'm watercoloring right on top of it. All right. I also can use these. Here's some parallel guides. On the back of this little birdie here. So this approach really helps me be intentional about, I've got phase 1 of my drawing, light, loose, fast, and I don't have to be like, oh no, I got to be really, really, really light, and how hard am I going to press? I can just crank a whole bunch of stuff down on my page with that non-photo blue pencil. And I don't have to worry about going too dark, too fast. And then when I think I've got it all, I stop, I breathe, and I look at it with the expectation that I have probably made the parts that I'm the most interested in too large. All right? And I go, did I do it again? And again and again and again, I find like, oh, yep, you sure did that. And I go, okay. All right, now I'm gonna do this differently, right? And I'm gonna change that before I pick up my graphite pencil or pen and start drawing over that. So there's that little pause where I get my stuff down. I don't just grab my pencil and now I get to draw the teeth. I will pause and go did I do that proportion thing again? Because I know I always do. Expect to see it, and you'll actually find yourself doing it. Then you can correct it, and then draw on top of that corrected version. I once saw a how to draw book that was sort of showing the steps of this person doing a drawing. They got almost all the way to the end, and they said, and check the proportions. Well, if you check it then, all you can do is go, oh darn. Right? Or you can scan it into Photoshop and start using those little morphing tools to try to change your proportions. But why not check them at the start of the drawing when you still can do something about it? The other really cool thing about the non-photo blue pencil is it makes you draw 16 drawings in a month. All right, so number four is probably the biggest drawing trick or technique that professional artists and illustrators use all the time that people who are just starting didn't get the memo on, right? And you're about to get the memo. This is the big secret. That what are they doing that I'm not? Probably they are doing this trick more than you. And what it is looking at negative shapes. Negative shapes is a really, really big deal. And I know this, I've talked about it before, and so people are familiar with it. I want to now make the people who already know about negative shapes see, like, I had no idea I could use it that many places, right? It's not just an exercise that you do in drawing a chair, all right? You use it all the time. The idea of a negative shape is that if you're drawing me, take a look at my shadow back here. See my shadow? All right? If you're making a sketch of my shadow, the shape of the white area right here underneath my arm is as important a shape as the arm itself. And when you look at me over here, there's so much detail in here, it's easy to get lost in that detail. We get lost in that detail and we're confused and disoriented. But when you're looking at the whole next to me, there's no detail here. And it's actually easier to see the contours when you're not looking at me, when you're actually looking at the whole. So there's an elk that's wandering across the field. I'll look at what is the shape of the air underneath its legs, and then attach my elk on top of that. Right? Let's go over to seeingbirds.com. Right? And here's there's a woodpecker in front of you. Look at all this detail in here. This is really distracting and confusing to us because our brain spends a bunch of its neurons just kind of going, oh my gosh, there's all these, how am I going to handle that, right? So instead, don't look at the bird, look at the shape of the green here in front of the bird. Do you see that? Compare how it's easy when you look at this shape here, you can see the contours of this woodpecker actually more easily when you are looking at the green than when you're looking at the bird. Just get your brain to flick back and forth and notice how much easier it is to see that contour. You're not getting distracted by the detail. And that's what the trick of looking at negative shapes is. And some people use it a little bit, and I'm going to try to get you to use it a lot. So just to kind of get us kind of initially kind of set into this, I'd like everybody 3 times on your piece of paper, draw the shape of this green space right here. So the little line that comes in, comes down, comes out to this corner here, then down like that, then up like that. Draw that shape 3 times. If you're already done, do one more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little oval back here. I'm going to put a circle roughly up in here, trying to get the proportions of those. Then I'm going to look at this negative shape here. And my woodpecker is essentially drawn. Let's take a look at another critter here. I don't know. this bird was this was a picture of this bird I found on seeingbirds.com.
You find polar bears on seeingbirds.com.
That's right. There's some amazing polar bear birds on Seeing Birds. So I didn't do this with you folks just because of sort of limited time, but I've used this picture before, and what I've done is put it up at the start of a class and just had everybody draw it. And invariably, in everybody's drawing, the space between these legs was too big. And people had these drawings of this bear, head out here, and then had a leg coming down here, and then there's a leg coming down here. Right? And this space, this negative space, was too big. What we're going to try to do is to tweak that. Draw this negative space and wrap the bear around it. What the negative space does is when you're drawing the non-bear, you get out of this part of your head that knows how the bear should look. Right? Everybody also wants to draw the bear like this. Here's my bear, and here's its head sticking out here. But look at this. Everybody wants to stick the bear head out here. That's a negative shape. That's a negative shape. That negative shape there forces the bear head into the body. But people will sometimes start drawing this, and they'll have their sketch of their bear. All right, here's my bear body with my bear foot. Here's my other little bear foot. They've got their bear head out here, and this negative space doesn't fit onto the drawing that they started to make. And they'll go like, that negative space, that negative shape does not work, right? And instead of having that be this little kind of bell that goes off, the thing I've drawn, there's some kind of, I've got to believe those negative shapes. Let that negative shape says, no, I want you to constrain the head location like that. All right, okay, I'm going to have to bring my head, if you insist, right, believe the negative shapes, because the negative shape has no commitment to your brain's idea of how a bear should look. And the more that you start employing these into your drawings, the more you will find that your drawing is going to start to look like that thing that's really there in front of you. Here's a photograph of, anybody know this landform right here? What's that one? Excellent. For extra style points, can anybody name that? Or is it Sentinel Rocks? We'll have to find out. Maybe Sentinel Rocks or Three Sisters. Or both, right? So here's what happens with this. We're interested in El Capitan. I'm going to call it Sentinel Rocks for now, right? And Sentinel Rocks over here. So what people will do is, in their little drawing, they will have El Capitan over here, and then they will draw the Sentinel Rocks. But what they're missing is that this space between them actually has a shape, right? And you'll put them too close together or too far apart unless you look at this as a shape. So one way of doing this is to take the shape of El Capitan, draw that, then take the shape of the air here, draw that, and then put the shape of the rocks next to that. But you're actually going to use the shape of the air as one of the positive shapes in your drawing. Here's another example. Do you see how the negative shapes apply here? So we think we're drawing the rocks, but actually drawing the air between the rocks is as important. Right. On this elk here, right? This is from birdpixel.com. Another kind of strange-looking bird. Right? So on this one right here, look at all the places you can use negative shapes. Whether that's this, and some people will say, well, okay, this is a negative space because it's all enclosed here. But actually, this is just as much a negative space here. You can just sort of imagine, if there was a box here, you'd say, oh yeah, then that is. But things that are where there's no kind of framing edge around it, you're just going to look at the shape of the air that is back there. It doesn't have to be an enclosed space. What are some other really good negative places you could use negative shapes in this? Yeah, isn't that cool? Both in front of and in back. And look at when you start looking at like this as this weird kind of nose little thing. This really has a distinctive shape. What you want to do is get your brain to flicker back and forth to either looking at the positive shape, the elk, to the negative shape, the space between the elkness, the inter-elk, right? So you're going to be drawing elk, then you're drawing non-elk. If I'm drawing this antler here, right, look at this shape of non-elk right there, right? So if I have, here is some non-elk, all right? I can then draw some elk. Now I'm going to draw some non-elk. Look at this tooth of dark. It's a little tooth of dark. I'm looking at that shape there and drawing it in. That is next to this little piece. Now there's a block here. Right. I draw that shape. And I don't have to put these little hatch marks in. I'm just sort of using that to point out what I am visualizing. So my brain is skipping between elk, non-elk, elk, non-elk, elk, non-elk. A general approach I might take to doing this whole drawing in the field, often when I look at something like this, I will start by just thinking of the whole body of the elk as a box, and I notice how far down on that box the belly comes. So this is what I call my body box. And on different species, a gerenuk or a gazelle is going to have its belly way up here. A cow gets deeper. A pig is even deeper. A dachshund is really long and low, right? So I will draw my little body box, the proportions of which are going to change depending on the species that you're looking at. And then on top of that, I can start to insert negative spaces. Look at this. It comes up, down, little hat, and there. So I can come up, down, little hat, and so I'll start to put these negative spaces on here. There's roughly a negative space that kind of comes like this. With my non-photo blue pencil, I block it in lightly, and then on top of that, I can start to refine it. And then start working on those spaces and negative spaces going up the antlers. This is a neat shape here. And then I'll get my critter blocked in. And what I want to do is, before I move on and get out my graphite pencil and start drawing in the elk, I'm going to stop, double check it. Does this feel like it's got the same proportions as the elk that's on here? The elk that's in front of me. So I stop, I check, I triple check that. We have a tendency, if we check to make sure it's right, your brain will say, oh yeah, just get along with what you're doing, you're right. But if you check to see, did I do my old shenanigans? Expect yourself to make some silly goofs. Expect your proportions to go off. expect there to be negative shapes that don't really fit, because when there are, that's a total gift. When you find a negative shape and they're like, oh, there's that negative shape there, but wait, that doesn't really fit on my drawing. That is the gift of that negative shape saying, there's something on your paper that doesn't really fit. You need to take another look. So but we tend to just sort of skip past that little clue. And so just stop and kind of go like, oh, thank you, negative shape, you rock. All right? The more that you train yourself to look for and to find these negative shapes, your drawing, the drawing problems you have in front of you will start to solve themselves. Once you start looking for them, they're everywhere. That shape is just as important as that shape. So you want your brain to flicker back and forth. And at the start, it will feel really weird. It will feel weird because you want to look at the bird, but look at the non-bird. Right? So one more. When I look across my own drawings and the drawings of lots of other sketchers, one of the big things that I see that people can do to really take their drawings up a notch is just to expand the range of contrast in their drawings. So contrast is the difference between dark and light. Right? So dark, light. Most of us in our drawings are playing in the shallow end of the pool. We have the white of our paper, and we have as dark as we can get with our HB pencil. And that's as dark as we go. Right? But there's this whole other range here that we completely leave out of our drawings. And the same is true with our watercolors. Many of us are taught in our watercolor classes to work from light to dark. So we put in our light washes, and we carefully, people have been taught that, right? And so you carefully start kind of putting in more darks until you kind of get the dark-light balance to kind of work so that the light point and the dark point is sort of, the right places. And you kind of very carefully work this out. But then the whole picture, you realize the whole entire thing is way too anemic. That we've gotten, we've kind of worked from light to dark, and we stop somewhere in here. And so a good strategy, if you're working with watercolor, is if there is some really dark part of the thing and you can force yourself to kind of go dark. By very early on, you just put a little dark blob in some of your really dark part. It's going to force your whole drawing to come up to that dark point. So you're going to make a dark anchor early on. I'm going to create a dark anchor, and that's going to push me to make my whole kind of value range go all the way over to that. So the dark anchor is a very useful way to make yourself extend your value range. Don't wait till the drawing is all over and then kind of go like, oh, it's all pretty light. All right. Another problem that I find that people have with values is the way that this is taught in a lot of art classes is that people are taught that there's dark and there's light and there's this smooth gradation between them. And so people spend a lot of time in art studios shading a sphere or a cylinder, and you spend all this time just micro blending. And it trains us that you get patted on the back if you get a smooth transition from dark to light. So we then see our object and we see it's dark over there, it's light over there, and then we on autopilot start filling this value between them. Oh no. Because in real life, most objects actually have planes and angles on their bodies. I was looking at a pigeon today, and you think the pigeon's body is round. Oh no, it wasn't. It had, the parts of the pigeon were like carved. There was like, this is a flat part, and then it turns here. There are inflection points around that. And when you see that, you will see very quick transitions of like this whole part is light, and then you can almost draw a line along the side of the pigeon where the shadow starts, instead of it being this smooth blend on some idyllic sphere. So a more powerful way of thinking about value range is not this, it's this. Give yourself, here's my dark, here's my light, and there's something in between. If you keep it to 3 steps of value, but here's the critical thing, so not just 3 steps of value. you are going to look at your object and decide what is the shape of the dark part. What is the actual shape of the highlight part? And therefore, the part in the middle actually has a shape because it's confined by two shapes on the either side. The shapes of each of these areas will define the planes of your object. So this is very different than just smear your light over. This is your darkest area has a shape, your lightest area has a shape, therefore your middle area has a shape. So look for the shape in the shadow. Look for the shape in the highlight. Look for the shape in the shadow. Look for the shape in the highlight. And that's what you want to record. Sometimes if most of my drawing is actually these lighter things, I'll sometimes come in with a fourth little value there, or if most of it is dark, I might have a fourth that's here. But with 3 or 4 values, I can get away with most drawings. And people don't go like, oh, hey, you're just like using 3 values. Where's your value range? But look, you can see the shape of this rock because of the shape of here just with 2 values. And you can visualize the shape of that boulder. Right? Because the highlight has a shape. If this was a soft blend, you wouldn't get that. So find the shape in the shadow, the shape in the highlight, and push your value range. And contrast will be your friend. Right? Things are only light because other things are dark. So here are some aspen trees. Aspen trees have this bright bark. But the minute I start kind of putting some of the shadows or values into it, it starts to feel darker. But what I want you to note is that watch what happens to the brightness of this tree as I start to darken the background. So we're going to darken the background and just watch these trees and observe how bright they feel, right, as we do this. And just sort of at a couple of points, and I'm going to say, what if we stopped here and just sort of notice the brightness of it, right? So let's watch. So there's this. Okay, what if you stopped here? Watch these trees get, what if you stopped here? Right. Can you see those trees start to feel more kind of luminous? All of a sudden, this is really bright because this is dark. Because this is dark. So by expanding your value range, you add drama, interest, and you start looking around the world around you, and you'll see that there's wonderful value range all around you, and it gives you depth in your pictures. But most of us are in our sketchbooks in the shallow end of the pool. So this is a thing that universally, including myself, we can all work to do. With this, just put your hand over the bird in the top left-hand corner. And notice that when you put it back in, the sky becomes brighter. Because there's something dark against it. These were over at Lake Merritt. Some cormorants on a log, and the water felt really bright behind them. And I wasn't getting it until I pushed the darkness on these cormorants. And even on little landscape-itos, I find if I can push the values in those, especially in elements of things that are closer to me, that really helps me get a sense of depth. So I want my bright brights and my dark darks in those parts that are closer to me. Less contrast as I go into the background. So the more of a value range I am able to produce, the more depth I can represent in my picture. Because depth, one of the things that shows depth is the difference between dark and light. With your pencils, most of us are using an HB pencil. That's what the typical kind of Dixon Ticonderoga number 2 pencil. All right? Great for taking a test. But when you really want to punch in your darks, it puts a middle gray. So my standard drawing pencil, when I am doing stuff in pencil, is a 2B pencil. The more B's, the softer, the darker a pencil can make. The more H's there is in front of the name, like a 5H pencil, is really, really hard pencil. It will not make a dark mark. So you look at whatever your pencil is, and you go like, oh man, I'm using a 2H here. No wonder all my pencil drawings are super light. How does that person over there get those like rich darks? They're using a 2B. Right? Or not to be. What I'm going to suggest is you make your standard drawing pencil, your go-to pencil, a little bit darker. And you automatically, just the pencil in your hand can make richer darks. You'll find that it's more smooth on the paper, just flows on the paper a little bit more nicely. You will also find that it smudges a little bit more easily. A big problem, especially if you have a spiral-bound notebook, soft pencils smudge a lot because the pages can kind of wiggle on each other like that. So to help fight against that, what you can do is when you get home, when you first come back from the field, just hit it with a little bit of spray fixative, and that prevents a lot of that. So in journal pages where here's a bunch of pencil drawings. What I will often do is not draw over on this page because I don't want this page smearing over to here. And I also want to prevent these from just sort of smudging around into a gray kind of ghost halo. I will just hit this with a little bit of spray fixative. And not an issue if I'm working primarily in pen. Right? Also, if you put watercolor on graphite pencil, it doesn't smear quite as much. If you're doing a drawing, just say with a black grape Prismacolor pencil, those don't smear as much as well. And so you can use, there are some nice dark pencils, like a lot of the sort of wax-based colored pencils. Those they don't want to smear. You can't erase them, but they won't be smearing on you. But it allows you to punch in some nice darks. With watercolor, there are a few colors on your palette. If you start messing around, you can figure out which colors allow you to punch in super rich darks. So I'm not saying the black on your palette, but there are some colors there that actually go really dense, really dark, really saturated. And like on some palettes, you get the black paint out and you go, okay, I'm going to make this dark, and I'm going to put in the black. And the black, when you really kind of soup it up, it's like this sort of weird kind of gray ghosty thing. You can't really punch it all the way to dark. On the palette that I use, I know which colors will saturate to something that's super dark. And I use those all the time. And they're so dark that sometimes, like in a forest background, I can take say, carbazole violet or dioxazine violet, also called Windsor violet, and put that into the background in part of these trees, and it'll just sort of feel like people might get a little kind of glimpse of some kind of color in it, and it will just sort of feel like dark shadows. So a couple of my favorite are Bloodstone Genuine, dioxazine-based violet, so that's either Windsor violet or carbazole violet or dioxazine violet. Indanthrone blue makes crazy good darks. And there's this wonderful green that goes, to a really solid dark. Have some Perylene green in your palette, and you can really punch those darks in. That's why when some people say, like, I just do everything with these 3 primaries, right? Why don't you just do that? Well, it's because each pigment has different capacity to, like, for instance, either staining or non-staining, or ability to go super dark. And by giving yourself more options on your palette, I find that really useful. So some pigments have these abilities to just, in the mass tone, in the dark, pow, there's a real punch. So those are some of my favorite ones. Lastly, what I want to do is give you a walkthrough with a sketch that I made of a fox skull. And kind of and you can sort of see that I kind of finish it out, but there's no real value difference there. And see what you can do to sort of, with a graphite pencil, start messing with the values. So this was sort of perhaps the non-photo blue pencil kind of initial framework. You notice that I have some lines here, those parallel guides. But just sort of pause for a moment and notice that if you are just super anxious to get on and get to draw the teeth on this fox skull because they're really, really cool, and maybe you don't spend enough time in this and kind of double check, what happens if you don't make your parallel guides parallel? Right? So it's just that initial part, it actually is really important. So here I was just really excited to kind of get on with my drawing and notice that this is not parallel with those. And that may come back to haunt me. We will see. We will see. All right, so the first thing that I do is I draw in sort of the details on my skull, kind of work that line work up, initially sort of figuring out where things are, and then starting to punch in what I think are some of the major lines. And then I put, sort of using this idea that shadows are shapes, I put hatching in on the areas that were in shadow. And I then took a blending tool and sort of made those together. But I really want, this is my shadows here, shadows here. What are the locations of these shadows? With the blending tool, those kind of smoothed together a little bit. I kind of lost a little bit of the highlight that was in here. But with soft pencil, this is with a 2B pencil, you can then take a kneaded eraser. You know those gummy erasers? Does anybody have one with them? With a kneaded eraser, thank you. So with these, the best way to, you don't kind of warm them up by kneading them. So everybody kind of like, it's not changing. What you do is you pull, I'll just use a little hunk of this. You pull on the eraser like taffy, like that. And that warms it up, softens it up. And then what I can do is take this, and I can take it into a blob and kind of go wipe, 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 tap, tap, tap. Or make it into a little knife edge and kind of go tick, 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 and slice out some highlights back into those shadows. All right? And I go, okay, great. There's my little fox skull. But notice the value range in this, from the darkest dark. I've got some dark lines, but in my shadows, again, I am playing in the shallow end of the pool. Kind of, I'm doing some little micro adjustment in here, when really the range of shadows is much greater. So to kind of force myself to kind of deal with some darks in here, I gave myself a big dark anchor. Got a 6B pencil and went, boom. Right? And once I do that, like, this kind of shadowing, it's feeling really anemic. So I brought a lot of that darkness into the skull. Then got out that kneaded eraser again, kind of losing, sometimes I like these sort of lost and found edges here. Where does the skull start? Where does it end? But I kind of picked part of that back out with that kneaded eraser, left that sort of lost and found edge going on down here and down there. The last thing that I do is I put in a little bit of detail, kind of crisps it up. The problem with detail, though, is it's so much fun to apply that once you get going, you're almost guaranteed to overdo it, because that was fun, right? So a little bit kind of gives you emphasis, but too much, and it just starts to these out. Why not put on more? Well, then it'll start to feel like you just took pepper and spilled it all over the whole thing. All right? So too much, that's too much of a good thing, I'd say. So you're not going to know when to stop on a drawing. The general rule of thumb is stop before you think you're done. All right? And then lastly, just kind of going back to those parallel guides. Let's go draw a line between these two kind of very prominent features right there. All right? Okay, and the chin kind of lines up with those. Well, let's put those, see how those kind of work with a number of other features on this. Like there's this little kind of spur on the zygomatic arch here, which we see pointing towards us right there. There's the top and the bottom of the nose, and we put those in, and way off there, and a little bit off here. So this fox's nose is pointing a different direction than the rest of the skull. All right? Because I didn't make my parallel guides parallel at the start. Had I just slowed down a little bit there, I could have tweaked that and fixed it. But I was so excited about, like, look, it's got these cool teeth, and I want to draw that little hole there because it's a neat little divot, and I like that. All right. All right. So sometimes just a pause at the start, right when you're about to put down your non-photo blue pencil, that's your chance to find and correct these sorts of things before you go on into the rest of the drawing. And just a little pause there, 10 seconds, would have fixed this in the final drawing. At this point, it's too late. But I don't get myself bent around the axle around it. Every drawing is just preparation and training for the next one. So every drawing is practice for the next drawing. And if I noticed something about fox skulls that I otherwise wouldn't have seen, then that drawing is successful. Right? If by doing that I kind of got in the zone and sort of felt that calmness that Lena was talking about, then that drawing is successful. If it helps me remember the structure of that fox skull, that drawing is successful. And if that art critic comes up and goes like, oh no, like how could you possibly do that? I just kind of like, judging critic, the most important thing here is this process of looking and seeing and learning. And you know what? I'm taking to my next drawing a really useful lesson. The next time, I'm much more likely to check that my parallel guides are parallel. All right? And that's going to help the bobcat skull drawing. So these are all things that you can do to help and improve your drawing. See if there's parts of this that are slightly different than what you are doing. And then what you want to do is just draw a lot, and then what you want to do is to draw a lot. That's the heart of it. Because when you draw a lot, you are changing the shape of your brain. You have control over the shape of your brain. And that is incredibly, incredibly powerful. You're not stuck with the brain that you have. You can change the shape of your brain. And you can do that in all sorts of areas. You can do that in drawing. You can do that in being calm in stressful situations. You can do all sorts of things to take the attributes that you would like to have, and you practice those, and you rehearse those, and you drill those. You are fundamentally changing the structure of your brain. And that's really, really empowering. So take this home, have some fun with it, play with it, see what you can do. You owe me 16 drawings, except Lena didn't take a pencil, all right?
I'll do this.
You're still going to do 16 drawings. Excellent. I want to encourage people to put those up on Facebook if you are able to. I also want to send a special shout out and thanks to Ashok Khosla, our videographer, who makes these workshops accessible to everyone all over the world. Thank you, Ashok. Thank you, Nature Journal Club. I'll see you in the field.